Fiat Talent Type 2 MultiJet L2H1 Business Pro DC engine code M9R V7, 1997 cc. 4-cylinder, 2019 diesel. The bus has a classic problem. The starter motor turns over, but the engine does not really start when brake cleaner is sprayed directly on it. In practice, this means that the basic mechanics appear to be in order, that the engine has sufficient compression, and that the crankshaft and camshaft signals are present. But that combustion does not start under normal conditions because there is either not a good fuel mixture in the cylinders, or the injection is incorrect in timing or amount, or the air supply is seriously disturbed. Because no error codes are stored in the engine management system, the diagnosis must be approached step by step and very systematically. This bus is equipped with a 2-liter diesel engine from the M9R family, which has been used extensively in collaboration with another manufacturer. These engines were built in various versions from approximately the beginning of 2000 to approximately the end of 2025 and used in various commercial vehicles. There are many experiences and known problems with these engines available online, such as contamination in the intake tract, a stuck exhaust gas recirculation valve, problems with the particulate filter, problems with the high-pressure fuel pump, defective or leaking injectors, and in some cases problems with the wiring or connectors of sensors and actuators. To draw up a diagnosis and repair plan, it is necessary to build up the steps logically and start with the simplest checks. First, it is necessary to determine whether the engine is mechanically sound by listening to the compression during starting, and, if in doubt, performing a compression test with a suitable diesel compression gauge to rule out the possibility of a mechanical problem such as a shifted timing belt, a burnt valve, or a broken piston. With this engine, it is important to check that the timing chain or belt is still correctly adjusted, even if the diagnostic equipment indicates that the synchronization between crankshaft and camshaft is present, because a small adjustment can sometimes be made without an error code appearing. The air supply must then be checked by checking that the air filter housing is not clogged or full of water, or that parts in the intake duct are clogged by contamination, and that the intake valves near the swirl flaps can move freely, and that the exhaust is not blocked, for example by a completely clogged particulate filter or a dented silencer. A completely clogged exhaust duct can also prevent the engine from starting, even though the pressure in the fuel rail appears to be at the correct level. Then the fuel side comes into the picture. The measured rail pressure of approximately the standard value seems sufficient, but there are still important points to check, such as the control of the injectors and the actual injection quantity. With a good diagnostic tester that is specifically suitable for this engine family, such as a brand-specific tester or a high-quality device from a well-known manufacturer, live data can be read during starting, including rail pressure, corrections for fuel loss, injection time, battery voltage during starting, and any blocking of the start by protections. Because the engine starts on brake cleaner but not on diesel, there is a strong suspicion that the injectors do not inject too much fuel into the cylinders, even though the rail pressure is formally sufficient. It is therefore wise to check the injectors individually with a backflow test, in which special measuring cups are connected to the return pipes, and it is checked during starting whether one injector returns much more fuel than the other or shows no movement at all, because an injector with extreme leakage or a completely clogged injector can seriously damage the engine. If this test shows that one or more injectors exhibit abnormal behavior, overhaul or replacement is necessary. This is a well-known cost item with modern diesel engines. The price for a reconditioned injector is between 300 and 600 euros each, including installation and coating, depending on the brand and quality. Labor costs can amount to several hours of work, with an hourly wage of around 60 to 100 euros at an independent garage, and often higher at a dealer. If the injectors are functioning fairly evenly, but the engine still won't start, the next step is to test the high-pressure fuel pump and pressure regulator. The high-pressure pump may be internally worn, causing the pressure to be too low under dynamic conditions when starting, or the control valve may become stuck. A test bench check of the pump or replacement may then be necessary. This can amount to many hundreds of euros in labor and parts, sometimes even more than 1,000 euros including installation. In addition to the fuel side, it is important to carefully check the electrical side as well, even if no error codes are stored. With a multimeter and preferably an oscilloscope, the voltage on the injectors can be measured during starting, and the signal from the crankshaft and camshaft sensor can be viewed in detail, so that it is clear whether the engine management system actually activates the injectors at the right time. The ground and power connection of the engine management system must also be checked, because a bad ground sometimes does not cause error codes, but does lead to starting problems. The necessary diagnostic equipment consists of a professional diagnostic tester, a multimeter, an oscilloscope, a diesel compression meter, and an injector backflow meter, and of course standard tools for the garage. Known problems with this bus and engine family that you often encounter on the internet include clogging of the particulate filter due to many short journeys, causing the engine to go into limp mode or ultimately not start properly, exhaust gas recirculation valves that get stuck in the open or closed position, disrupting the air-fuel mixture and combustion, defective air mass meters, and intake temperature sensors. Dirty intake ducts and sometimes clogged fuel filters when using poor fuel or when the filter element is not used for a long time. Replace. In the event of a breakdown while driving without an error code and the car subsequently no longer wants to start, the high-pressure pump and injectors are the most obvious causes, but a rotor in the distribution that has skipped or an internal fault in the engine management system can also play a role. To get an idea of the costs and maintenance, it is good to know that minor maintenance on a bus with this engine usually consists of replacing the engine oil with the correct type and viscosity, and the oil filter, checking all fluids, a visual inspection of the brakes, tires and chassis, and reading fault codes. This service often costs between 300 and 500 euros, depending on the workshop and region. In addition to the above, the major service usually includes replacing the air filter, fuel filter, and cabin filter, and if necessary, replacing the brake fluid, as well as a more extensive inspection of the suspension, steering, and exhaust system. This service can cost between 500 and 1,000 euros or more if additional parts such as brake discs, shock absorbers, or wishbones need to be replaced. In general, it can be said that the service life of important components is as follows. A starter motor often lasts between 100 and 300,000 kilometers in normal use, and an alternator can reach a similar distance under favorable conditions. Shock absorbers in many commercial vehicles, on the other hand, often show a noticeable decline in performance around 80,000 to 150,000 kilometers, depending on the load and road surface. The timing belt or chain, depending on the model, should be replaced preventatively every few years or after a certain number of miles to prevent catastrophic engine damage and thus reduce timing costs. The costs for distribution, including water pump and rollers, including labor, are often between 700 and 1,500 euros for commercial vehicles. For future-oriented maintenance and prevention of problems, it is wise to follow a maintenance plan with fixed intervals of, for example, 10,000 to 200,000 kilometers. The oil level is checked every 10,000 kilometers and topped up if necessary. The tires and brakes are checked every 20,000 kilometers or annually. The oil and oil filter are replaced after approximately 40,000 kilometers. The air filter and fuel filter are replaced after approximately 60,000 kilometers. The brake fluid, and if necessary, the coolant are replaced, and at higher mileages, depending on time and advice, the distribution is replaced. By not idling the engine unnecessarily and occasionally making longer journeys, the particulate filter can regenerate better and contamination in the intake tract can be limited to a certain extent. When purchasing a used bus of this type, a purchase inspection is highly recommended. During this inspection, an experienced mechanic views the bus on the bridge, takes a test drive, performs a diagnosis, and pays attention to matters such as the load on the particulate filter, previous error codes, oil and coolant leaks, noises from the turbo injectors, and the drivetrain. The maintenance booklet is also checked for regular maintenance and timely replacement of the distribution and filters. If the engine runs erratically during the test drive, starts slowly, smokes a lot, or is difficult to start when the engine is warm, extra caution is required. This may indicate emerging problems with the injectors, the particulate filter, or the turbo, which can entail high costs. With regard to the choice of construction years, and engines up to approximately 2026, it is generally wise to approach the first years of construction of a completely new model or a completely new engine series with some caution in the case of commercial vehicles, because teething problems are then more likely. Therefore, it is better to choose a model that has been in production for several years, and for which many known problems are described online, so that you know what to look out for. Diesel engines remain functional in medium-duty commercial vehicles as long as high mileage is driven, mainly outside the city, but for short trips and low mileage, modern diesel engines with a particulate filter and complex aftertreatment may be more susceptible to failure. In that case, a petrol or electric motor may be a more sensible alternative in some cases. To specifically solve your starting problem and prevent recurrence in the future, it is important to complete the diagnosis described above. Therefore, first check the mechanical condition and timing, then the air intake, the exhaust, and the particulate filter, then thoroughly test the fuel injection with emphasis on the injectors and the high-pressure pump, and finally the electrical control of the system, including the ground and power supply of the engine management and the injection. Once it is clear which part is the culprit, a targeted repair plan can be drawn up with a choice between new parts or reconditioned parts. New parts are typically more expensive, but often have a longer warranty, while remanufactured parts are usually cheaper, but carry a slightly higher risk depending on the quality of the remanufacture. The hourly rate of an independent garage is usually between 60 and 100 euros per hour, while official dealers often charge between 90 and 150 euros per hour. This means that complex diagnostic work such as this, which takes several hours to complete, can easily cost hundreds of euros in diagnostic costs before any parts are replaced. However, by being systematic, you will avoid unnecessary, random replacement of expensive parts. Ultimately, this is the best way to limit costs and guarantee the long-term reliability of the bus.